Stephen Miller walked into the CNN debate studio with his usual cold confidence, his pale complexion almost glowing under the bright lights. The former Trump advisor straightened his dark suit and surveyed the room like he owned it. He had just spent the last 10 minutes backstage telling his team how he was about to school Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett on immigration policy. "She's just another progressive who doesn't understand the real world," he smirked, adjusting his tie. But what happened in the next 30 seconds would leave Miller completely speechless and change everything. Jasmine Crockett sat across from him, calm and collected, her professional blazer perfectly pressed, a stack of documents in front of her that Miller hadn't noticed yet. She looked directly into the camera with a slight smile and said, "Before we start, let me ask everyone watching, comment below where you're from, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to see is going to be unforgettable." Miller rolled his eyes, thinking this was just typical political theater. He had no idea that Crockett had spent the last 3 days preparing something that would expose his entire immigration narrative in front of millions of viewers. The documents in front of her contained information that would turn Miller from confident policy expert into a fumbling mess in record time. The studio fell silent as Anderson Cooper introduced both guests. Miller leaned forward, ready to deliver what he thought would be a masterclass in immigration policy. But Crockett was already 3 steps ahead, and Miller was about to learn why underestimating her was the biggest mistake of his political career. This wasn't just going to be a debate. This was about to become Miller's worst nightmare, broadcast live to the entire nation. Stephen Miller had built his reputation as Trump's immigration hardliner, the architect behind some of the most controversial border policies in recent history. At 38, he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who believed his Harvard law degree and years in the White House made him untouchable in any policy debate. He had appeared on countless news shows, always with the same strategy: overwhelm opponents with rapid-fire statistics and legal jargon that made them look unprepared. Miller's team had specifically requested this debate because they saw Crockett as an easy target. "She's a freshman congresswoman from Texas," his communications director had told him earlier that day. "You'll destroy her on immigration. This will be great for your media profile." But Miller had made a critical error. He had completely underestimated who Jasmine Crockett really was. At 33, Crockett was a former civil rights attorney who had spent over a decade fighting immigration cases in Texas courts before winning her congressional seat. She had personally represented hundreds of families separated by immigration policies, many of them directly impacted by Miller's own handiwork during his White House years. Unlike other politicians who relied on talking points, Crockett knew immigration law inside and out because she had lived it, breathed it, and fought it in courtrooms across the state. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Miller needed this appearance to rehabilitate his image for a potential return to government. His book deal and speaking fees depended on maintaining his reputation as a policy genius. Meanwhile, Crockett was facing her own pressure. Progressive. Voters wanted to see her take down Trump-era officials, and she knew this was her chance to hold Miller accountable for policies that had torn families apart. As the cameras rolled, Miller sat back confidently, completely unaware that Crockett had done something no other opponent had ever done. She had actually read every single policy memo Miller had written during his White House tenure. And she had found something devastating. The tension in the studio was electric, but only one person knew what was really about to happen. Miller thought he was walking into a routine political debate. Crockett knew she was about to deliver justice. Anderson. Cooper started with what seemed like a simple question about border security, and Miller immediately launched into his typical performance. His voice took on that familiar tone, sharp, condescending, and filled with the kind of confidence that had intimidated other opponents for years. "Anderson, what we're seeing at the border is a complete failure of democratic policies," Miller began, his pale hands gesturing dramatically. "When I was in the White House, we had the most secure border in American history. We implemented policies based on law and order, not emotion and political correctness. He turned toward Crockett with a smirk that had become his trademark. Now we have congresswoman here who I'm sure means well, but she simply doesn't understand the complexities of immigration law. These progressive talking points might play well on Twitter, but they don't work in the real world. The studio audience stirred slightly. Miller's supporters in the crowd nodded approvingly, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Cooper tried to redirect to Crockett, but Miller wasn't finished. "Let me give you some real numbers, Congresswoman," Miller continued, pulling out his phone as if he was about to cite statistics. "During our administration, illegal border crossings dropped by 85%. We implemented Remain in Mexico, we built the wall, and we enforced the law. Can you say the same about your party's policies?" Miller sat back, clearly expecting Crockett to fumble with some generic response about compassion and human rights. This was his usual strategy: hit hard